with the prospect of a regional conflagration in the Middle East.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, level it out, create an economic development. Today, I also took action to restore a maximum pressure policy on the Iranian regime.
Countries you think might accept Palestinians from Gaza?
Well, I think Jordan and Egypt will, but I think other countries will accept also.
It's important, I think, to critique the systems of thought justifying all this. What I want to explore are some points that I don't often see made. And the first and obvious one is that today, religious Zionists, Christian and Jewish, almost always identify the biblical Israel exclusively with the modern Jewish diaspora, folks that have been living abroad for many generations, and Palestinians, for their part, are considered foreign Canaanites or Arabs.
What is this thing with Christians in Israel? It's a God thing. It's a God thing. Why do Christians like Israel so much? Because we get our news from the Bible, and in the Bible, Israel's the good guy. As a young man in South Carolina, I was raised to understand that God blesses those who bless Israel, and that's my foreign policy. It's not that complicated.
However, there was an early, widespread, but now generally ignored recognition among early Zionist thinkers themselves that local Aramaic and Arabic-speaking Christian and Muslim populations in the land of Israel/Palestine were of Jewish descent. Ben-Gurion and Ben-Zvi, the first prime minister and the second president of Israel, respectively, write as much in a book they co-authored called The Land of Israel, Eretz Israel, in the past and in the present. Quote, to argue that after the conquest of Jerusalem by Titus and the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt, Jews altogether ceased to cultivate the land of Eretz Israel is to demonstrate complete ignorance of the history and the contemporary literature of Israel. The Jewish farmer, like any other farmer, was not easily torn from his soil, which had been watered with his sweat and the sweat of his forebears. Despite the repression and suffering, the rural population remained unchanged. And they continue, the fellahin, farmer in Arabic, local Arab-speaking farmer, are not descendants of the Arab conquerors who captured Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, and Syria in the 7th century of the Common Era, AD. The Arab victors did not destroy the agricultural population they found in the country, nor did the Arabs go in for settlement. Even in their former habitations, the Arabian did not engage in farming. They did not seek new lands on which to settle their peasantry, which really hardly existed. They were mainly nomads and they had a few cities, but it wasn't a robust population is what's being said here that needed to settle excess people. We continue. Their whole interest in the new countries was political, religious, and material. End quote. His historic understanding of the issue is quite representative of early Zionism. Concerning the 70 AD destruction by the Roman Titus, Christians generally take the so-called Olivet Discourse as a prophecy of this coming destruction, where Jesus himself recommends that people take refuge in the mountains and the countryside before the coming judgment on the city, indicating that they would not be interfered with there, and that's true. That's the modus operandi, the MO of the Romans. Today, we have plenty of genetic evidence to indicate the continuity between Palestinians in general, and especially Levantine Christians, Palestinian Christians, Lebanese Christians, etc., together with Samaritans and Iraqi Jews and others, with Roman-era Jewish folks, as well as with the earlier population of that land. That's just what the genetic science is showing. Over time, they converted to Christianity and Islam. And we even have evidence of very recent conversions of villages from Judaism to Islam during the Ottoman period, such that some Palestinian families were confessionally Jewish even just a few generations back.
בחיפוש אחר צאצאי 10 השבטים הנעלמים בהודו ובאפגניסטן, שכחנו אולי להציץ לחצר האחורית שלנו.
התברר שחלק ניכר, כנראה, מערביי ארץ ישראל, הם בעצם צאצאים של אנוסים יהודים.
בהתלהמות מסוימת אמר, הרבה דם יהודי זורם בהם, בעיקרים הללו.
בני שבט הסווארקה, המפוזרים בין מדבר סיני לערבות מואב. כמה אנשים יש בשבט?
בשבט יש הרבה. 3,000 ומשהו.
וכולם יהודים?
כן, כולם מוצא יהודים. מאות שנים, לא היום, זה לא דבר חדש. למשל, אני שבת, אנחנו לא רואים את זה כמש. אמא שלי וסבתא שלי, אני זוכר את זה ילד, יש להם מקווה מיוחד.
למשל, שעד לפני כנראה 200 שנה, הכפר סכנין היה כפר יהודי, היה לו בית כנסת פעיל. וגם אז קרה תהליך של אסלום של הכפר הזה, תחת הלחץ השלטונות הטורקיים, והיום הכפר מזדהה ככפר ערבי, למרות שבני הכפר יודעים שהם בנו.
So there's no reason to identify Israel as an ancient category exclusively with the diaspora, and not at all with the local Palestinian population.
Then I would have to say that I affirm the reality of Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. God says, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. That's either true or it is not.
The scripture Huckabee is citing, Genesis 12:3, is directed at Abraham and does not actually mention Israel, which will come into existence with Abraham's grandson Jacob. Apart from Christian tradition, in which the church is viewed as the spiritual Israel, heir to the promises made to Israel in Scripture, the Bible itself anticipates an expansion of the category of chosen nation, and I've made a video about that before. On a kind of poetic wavelength, there is something biblical about local Jewish converts to Christianity and Islam over the centuries coming to be known as Palestinians, which is to say Philistines. The Philistines in the Bible are one of the principal enemies of the biblical Israel, and in the Bible, one often takes on the name of the enemy, of a sinner. Jacob pretends to be Esau. Jesus is cast in the role of a blasphemer and a criminal, etc. There's also something biblical about new expulsions of people from the land, which have been taking place for a while. And that brings us to a second point that doesn't often get made. Biblically, the most detailed late instruction for a return of Israelites to the land of Israel is found in chapter 47 of Ezekiel, and these emphasize giving the existing population full rights. They require full political enfranchisement of the local population, and especially full and equal access to the land. Quote, "You are to distribute this land among yourselves according to the tribes of Israel. You are to allot it as an inheritance for yourselves and for the foreigners residing among you and who have children. You are to consider them as native-born Israelites. Along with you, they are to be allotted an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. In whatever tribe a foreigner resides, there you are to give them their inheritance, declares the sovereign Lord." End quote. That should be extremely striking. If religious Zionism, Christian or Jewish, wants to make arguments from Scripture, Ezekiel is as relevant as he is ignored. He's certainly far more relevant than the book of Joshua, which has to do with a far earlier period, the return from Egyptian slavery. The Canaanites and others, who are to be cleared off in the book of Joshua, Exodus, Deuteronomy, and such, were pagan and practiced human sacrifices. Palestinians are monotheist, whether Muslim or Christian, and many Jewish persons for themselves are secular and are not religious. Of course, an Ezekiel chapter 47 inspired one-state solution would not be particularly desirable either to Palestinians or to Israelis, but the command that a return from exile must accompany the granting of equal access to that land for those in it, and that they are to be considered fully Israelite, should at least have been taken as a guiding principle, a scriptural grounds, for pursuing an equitable two-state solution. Again, if Scripture were actually what's at stake, you would have to take Ezekiel very seriously. Now, the fact that no mass expulsion took place doesn't mean the diaspora doesn't also descend from Levantines, from Judeans as well. None of this is to deny anybody their Jewish identity and connection to the land, but historical context is important, especially when it gets twisted to justify ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. In North Africa and Europe, specifically, the diaspora consisted of Jewish folks who had already established communities outside Judea, together with proselytes, converts into Judaism. Judaism was a proselytizing religion at one point. Jesus refers to this in the Gospels, and we have accounts of Roman conversions to Judaism from early centuries in the histories of Tacitus, Cassius Dio, and others. Two Romanized Jewish historians, Flavius Josephus in Against Appian and Philo of Alexandria in the Life of Moses, refer to Roman citizens converting into Judaism as well, and talk about it in positive terms. Apart from Judean enclaves throughout the Roman Empire and local converts into Judaism, more may have joined those communities as a result of political turmoil in Judea itself. So people who descend from urban Jerusalem-based populations that were taken into captivity by the Romans and not sacrificed or starved throughout the provinces, as Flavius Josephus reports, for example. The expulsion narrative may be true, therefore, in a limited sense, as one of the groups of people that made up North African and European diasporic Jewish communities. Now, apart from recognizing the local farmers, the Palestinians, fellahin, as long-lost brothers, we find that many Zionist thinkers did not limit their constituency in terms of religious confession. Many were secular themselves. They weren't saying we need a state only for religious Jewish people, nor did they do so in terms of explicit identity. The idea was often that, a lot of folks have lost their Jewish identity, integrated into other societies, but should have that identity rekindled. That's what they were often thinking. And that's all consistent with romantic nationalism, which Zionism partly stems from. There's nothing wrong with it, but since early and not so early Zionist thinkers themselves considered Palestinians to be mostly descended from local Jewish people, which is confirmed by proper historical and genetic research, apparently, and not limiting their political project to persons currently identifying as Jewish or religiously Jewish, there really is no coherent basis for the expulsion of Palestinians from the land. We can justifiably see this as a failure of Zionism's own rationale, realpolitik trumping ideological coherence. At the very least, these points should serve to deactivate the kind of apocalyptic urgency with which religious so-called Christians and Jewish Zionists pursue the expulsion and replacement of the Palestinian population. It should make folks more amenable to the two-state solution since, in a sense, the land is already largely occupied by descendants of Jacob, so to speak. The thwarting of a two-state solution has apparently been a long-standing feature of Israeli policy, unfortunately. And of course, Palestinian groups have done terrible things themselves, but the Israeli government's expansionistic approach is leading us to a regional war with very serious global implications, and specifically with a commitment that the United States would in no way benefit from. Okay, thank you very much for watching. A little bit of a controversial topic, but again, we wish good to all the parties involved, but we should be clear that a regional war and targeting of civilians is not acceptable morally. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you would like to, and until next time.